Sponging is a very basic technique to create texture. It's really easy. It's kind of fun too. So now when you're using a sponge though, you could use different kinds of sponges. So here I have like a ceramic sponge. I have a regular sink sponge. There are also natural sponges and whatnot that are all going to create different textures. And that's the thing, is they're creating textures. So it really, what it depends on is really the surface of the sponge. So when you look at that, they're going to have very different textures, right? Which are going to result in very different textures, okay? Now, you also notice the shape of this. Well, because this has a fine edge here, or a finer edge than this sponge, it's going to probably create a little bit of a line. So that's something to think about as well. It's pretty easy to do. So again, I'm going to be using some color here, obviously, right? So usually one of the ways that you could do this, a couple of different things, okay, is so I'm wetting my palette here, okay, and all I'm doing, so all I did there was I took the sponge and I dipped it into the paint, and then I started to put it down, right? And that creates that texture, okay? So as it starts to dry, you'll notice the texture starts to get a little bit finer, right? So it really depends on how much water you put down, okay? And also if there's water on your sponge. So let's see what happens when I'm going to put some water in my sponge. I'm going to recharge my color. So that means I'm adding more water and adding more pigment to it. Okay, so I'm doing that off screen, sorry. Okay, so now I'm going to take my sponge here, and I'm going to add some of that, so it's a little bit wetter, and what happens? The texture changes, right? It almost starts to blend in and the color desaturates. So that's something to think about, is if you're using a lot of water, that's going to happen. Now with this sponge, I come in here and you'll notice it does a different texture. Now I could actually take this and go straight into my pigment, okay? And you'll see that that creates that texture. So now my color is a little bit more saturated. It's a little bit brighter. It's a little bit more charged, as we say, right? Okay. So again, all I'm doing is just taking my sponge here, and I actually dipped it into the color. Okay, oh, that one's not really wet. So I come in here, right? And you could see I could start to layer these different textures. Okay. So obviously this would come out very different if I had water, like a wet into wet. So if I add some water here, see how it starts to change. Okay, not a lot, because the sponge is actually absorbing some of that water, right? But you can see the kind of texture and range that I could get with these techniques, okay? Have some fun with it.